Prince to come is one of the most controversial topics in the history of Christendom. Many people have speculated that the Prince to come is Antiochus Epiphanes, and the people to come as the Romans. Some theologians even speculate it's talking about Jesus. However, we believe the evidence substantially points to a different figure. In this video, we will be demonstrating who this individual may be. Today, we'll be focusing on Daniel 9, touching on the 70 weeks of Daniel and the coming prince. In the book of Daniel chapter 9, Daniel receives a detailed prophecy that accurately leads up to the coming of the Messiah Jesus Christ. It also details events foreshadowing his second coming. The 70 weeks are revealed in Daniel chapter 9 verse 24. 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city, to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up both vision and prophet, and to anoint the most holy place. Now, to gain some context, Gabriel gives Daniel a set of 70 prophetic weeks. Now, bear in mind that a week in a Western mindset would be 7 days. However, this is different to a biblical prophetic week. A prophetic week would be 7 years, which is also called a Shemitah according to Jewish cycles. So 70 weeks would be 70 times 7 years, which is 490 years. It's also important to note that the 490 years are also 10 cycles of Jubilees, which is every 49 years. So, within the 490 years, God promises to fulfill 7 things. For sin to be ended, to seal up the transgressions, to blot out the iniquities, to make atonement for iniquities, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the visions and the prophets, and to anoint the most holy. Now, it may come as a surprise to some, but Jesus actually quotes the 70 weeks of Daniel in Matthew chapter 18 verse 22. Jesus said to him, "I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. In other words, Jesus was saying, until the culmination of all these promises listed in Daniel 9:24, we must continue to live a holy life until God has restored all things. So as we can see, all these promises would have to be fulfilled in 70 weeks, all the culmination of 490 years. Now we will show you how 69 of those weeks have already been fulfilled. Continuing on to Daniel chapter 9 verse 25, it reads, "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The streets shall be built again, and a wall, even in troublesome times." Daniel chapter 9 verse 25. The timer started when the announcement to rebuild Jerusalem went forth. The time it took from the announcement to the complete rebuild spanned 7 weeks or 49 years. Now, if we take these 49 years from the original 490 years we started off with, we are left with 441 years to account for. Now, 434 of those years is designated for the Anointed One, the Messiah to come. This was fulfilled when Jesus Christ walked the earth. And after those 434 years, the Anointed One is to be put to death. And this occurred in 30 AD when Christ was crucified. If we also deduct this from the 441 years, we are left with just 7 years. So just a quick recap, the 7 weeks and 62 weeks, which is 483 years, have been used from the initial 490 years Daniel received. The last week, which is 7 years, is what we have left to account for. This refers to the tribulation period, which transpires in Revelation. This is where we see the Antichrist come and persecute the Christians and the Jews. Delving into the last 7 years, Gabriel mentions a prince to come. To understand who the prince to come is, it is crucial to read this passage from the Septuagint translation. Now the reason being is because in most of our common translations of the Bible, there's a noticeable difference within the wordings of Daniel chapter 9 verse 26 to 27. For example, the KJV and NIV. These translations have misled many believers to conclude that the prince to come is also Jesus, and the last week was fulfilled in 70 AD. Another misconception is the belief that the people of the prince were the Romans who destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD. This is most commonly known as the preterist viewpoint, and as we'll see, the evidence points us to a different direction when it comes to the identity of the prince to come. Now the first point we need to establish is that the Septuagint translation most likely would have been the text that Jesus and the earliest apostles read from. It was translated from the Hebrew to the Greek approximately 300 BCE, and the Septuagint reads, "After the 62 weeks, the Anointed One shall be destroyed, and there is no judgment in him, and he shall destroy the city and the sanctuary with the prince that is coming. They will be cut off with a flood, and to the end of war, which is rapidly completed, he shall appoint to desolations." Daniel chapter 9 verse 26. Now, this is big. Christ will be using the prince to come against his city, which is Jerusalem, and his sanctuary. And now notice how the NIV words this. "After 62 sevens, the Anointed One will be put to death, and will have nothing. The people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood, war will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed." And now the KJV. "And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof will be with a flood, and unto the end of war desolations are determined." Now these translations have failed to convey that Christ is using the prince to come. Now this second point is fundamental and is from the words of Christ himself after his resurrection. "I will no longer talk much with you, for the prince of this world is coming. He has no hold on me, but I do as the Father has commanded me, so that the world may know that I love the Father." Again, notice how Christ is quoting directly from the Septuagint reading of Daniel 9:26. We can now see that there are in fact two individuals within the context of the Septuagint translation. When Christ says in John 14 verse 30, "For the prince of this world is coming, he has no hold on me," he's clarifying that the prince to come has no judgment over him, and this is because Christ overcame the world. John 16 verse 33. So again, Christ will use the prince that is coming, who is also called the prince of this world, to destroy the city, which is Jerusalem, and the sanctuary. So, who is this prince to come? In the next video, we will be describing this menacing figure according to the scriptures and aligning him to an individual who is anticipated in another belief system.